What's up, everybody? Rob here. So this is just a real quick video that I'm putting out. I haven't been putting out videos as quickly as I would have liked. Most people are in quarantine. I am not. I work in an essential industry. Therefore, I've been working a lot more than I normally do, and I'm not putting out videos as fast as I would like. Such is life, I guess. Any case, I figured I'd do this. There is a regular history video that's coming out eventually. Don't worry about it. It will be coming eventually. But I figured I'd just do this because, why not? It seems like a fun thing to do. Any case, this was inspired by a tweet that came out a little while ago. And it gives a scenario, and of course, leave your own opinion down in the comments below of how you would handle this particular situation. So, the scenario is you walk out of a building, and there are a group of guys out there standing in front of you. Now, the tweet never actually specified how many. I'm just going to go with, for the sake of clarity here, 5. There are 5 guys standing out there in front of you. They're about to beat you up, probably going to take your money, probably going to take your shoes, because that's apparently a thing people do. However, helping you out, you have one American president ready there to help you out in this upcoming fight. So, you and one American president in a fight against 5 guys. Now, the parameters of the tweet were it is an unarmed fight, so no weaponry at all. You're not picking up weapons, no guns, no knives. You're not picking up a brick on the side of the road, bashing the guy's head in, nothing like that. It's just completely unarmed. And you cannot pick Theodore Roosevelt because that's the obvious choice. We all know that Theodore Roosevelt is built for this sort of thing. Like, he was designed in a laboratory to handle this exact scenario. You cannot pick him. Okay, so which American president would you choose? And there are a couple extra parameters that I'm putting in here. First off, we are only going to be doing deceased presidents because as soon as you put violence of any kind and presidents in the same thing, next thing you know, the Secret Service comes knocking at your door, and I just don't need that stress in my life. Also, I'm not going to be talking about the presidents at any particular time in their life, just basically their overall reputation and capabilities, not necessarily when they were president, because, sometimes their prime was, well before that. So you can say, oh, well, during president, this guy was kind of old and wouldn't be able to, yeah, I know. So it's more of their overall reputation rather than, any specific time in their life. And also, one final thing, I'm not going to be talking about the morality of any of these individuals. We got some pretty crazy dudes that held the office of presidency at some point or other. And I just want to say that I'm not going to be going to that at all. I'm just going to be talking about how good would they be in this particular exact scenario. Not exactly like, are they good people or are they, moral or anything like that. Just their fighting ability, one outnumbered 2 to 5. Okay? Okay, so without any further ado, here we go. So we're starting off the countdown with number 5, Mr. $50 bill himself, Ulysses S Grant. First off, he is a military man, which does give him some extra credibility. Now, he is not much of a brawler. He really doesn't have much of a reputation for physicality himself, but he does have a very determined mindset. And mindset means all in a fight. I mean, you can have people who are technically skilled, but if they don't have that determination to follow through, it's not really all that useful. So he has that, and he has that in spades. Actually, there was a subordinate of his that said, if I'm probably butchering the quote, but it was, he had a perpetual expression on his face as if he was about to run through a brick wall and was determined to do so. And when you have a metaphorical brick wall of these guys surrounding you, yeah, it would be pretty good idea to have somebody like Ulysses S. Grant in his mindset. He's got this do or die attitude. He's going to run right through these guys, and he's going to do so, or he's going to die trying. He's not going to bail on you. He's going to follow through to the end, and that's more important than I think than any physicality right there. So yeah, U.S. Grant, number 5. So number 4 on the list, Mr. $1 bill, the father of the country, George Washington. Now, you would think George Washington, I mean, he's like that stuffy old guy on like the dollar bill. It's like, how can he be like ready to back you up? Well, he's actually a lot more badass than people give him credit for, at least initially people when they think of him. First off, he was very big. He was, I think, 6'2", so he's one of the largest presidents we have, and apparently he was very powerfully built, especially in his youth. He also had a pretty extensive wrestling background. He was apparently very good at wrestling growing up in Virginia, which was wrestling was a common pastime activity amongst the upper classes. Well, actually, it's a common activity amongst pretty much everybody. I mean, even today, it's like, find any group of young men that don't wrestle at some point or another. So, yeah, he apparently was really good at it, and he would use his size to his advantage and would constantly be winning against his opponents. And something that most people don't really know about George Washington is that he would absolutely hulk out and go into complete utter rages. Now, he has this reputation of being very quiet and very soft-spoken, which he actually was. Partially that was just his personality, and also he didn't want his dentures to fall out because his teeth were terrible. No, they were not made out of wood. They were made of ivory and a couple other materials, and he didn't want them to fall out, though, so he just didn't speak very much and was a fairly quiet individual. However, if properly provoked, he could absolutely flip out and just basically become, well, an enraged George Washington. I don't know what else to say about this. In case, well, one particular incident happened at the Battle of Monmouth. Back during the American Revolution. And what happened was there was another general, General Lee, who basically thought he would steal the glory. It's a little more complicated than this, but basically he attacked the British without orders, hoping to rout the British. The British instead routed him, and Washington saw this happen, and Lee led the retreat. Like, he was on his horse bolting out of there while everybody else was falling back. Washington flipped out on this guy, rode his horse over to him, grabbed him, and started, according to one staff officer, cursing out Lee so loudly and so vigorously that and I quote, the leaves shook on the trees, and that it was the most beautiful thing that this officer had ever heard in his life. He also was so impressed he actually never wrote down what it is that George Washington said, but we can imagine it was pretty colorful. He then rallied relieved Lee of his command, rallied his troops, and then charged directly at the British. So in addition to being large, powerfully built, and full of rage, he was also completely fearless. I think it was during the French and Indian War, he heard the snapping of bullets around him, and he thought there was something charming in the sound. So basically, like, getting shot at, he thinks it's fun. And then he rode up and down the British lines during the Battle of Monmouth, this earlier incident. And, people were shooting at him. I think he had like 3 horses shot off from underneath him. He didn't care. He was untouched. And he just kept doing his, trying to rally his troops. So he has size going for him. He has a wrestling background. He completely can flip out should the situation call for it, and utterly fearless. I mean, he believed that he had this destiny, and nothing would stop him from doing so. So if you're surrounded by a bunch of guys, yeah, George Washington, he will absolutely got your back. I mean, he's not going to betray you. I mean, he's George frickin' Washington. If anything, you should be there ready to back him up, because he's going to be doing probably most of the heavy lifting, because let's face it, George Washington is more awesome than all of you. And me too. Let's just be honest. Next up on the list is Mr. $5 bill himself, Mr. Abraham Lincoln. A lot like George Washington, not necessarily people's first choice, but there is definitely more to him than meets the eye. So first off, he was the tallest president. He was 6'4", and although he was very tall and lanky, he also had a tremendous amount of physical strength. He grew up on a farm on the frontier, and because of that, he's got that crazy farm boy strength going for him, which he did manage to maintain through most of his life. Also, he was, like George Washington, a prolific wrestler, even more so than Washington. He's actually much more known for doing so than Washington was. And apparently he would win. He was, I believe, a champion, a local champion, at least maybe on a county level. But like, he was had a reputation amongst his community as being a fantastic wrestler. So incredible physical strength and size, as well as skill in wrestling, which is very useful. And, of course, he also has the incredibly determined mindset. I mean, it's not like you can just survive and hold the country together through the greatest crisis in our nation's history and do so with charm and eloquence like him, And no, he wouldn't shy away from fights as well. For example, one time there was a challenger of his that challenged him to a duel. He said, okay, we're going to use swords in a pit to the death. The guy backed out because he thought he could intimidate Lincoln, and Lincoln just wasn't having any of it. So yeah, he is more than willing to mix it up should the situation call for it. Importantly, though, a lot like Grant, too, is he had the mindset. I mean, he managed to hold the country together through the Civil War. I mean, the greatest disaster in our nation's history, and he managed to hold everything together. And he was also, he had chronic depression, so he was able to overcome that while also leading the country through this absolutely titanic crisis. Yeah, I think a couple of street toughs, probably no big deal for him. And he probably just towers over all of them anyway, because he's Abraham Lincoln and just, a massive individual. And also, if nothing else, he could probably talk our way out of it. Because, the guy can speak, and he can probably convince anybody to do he's Abraham Lincoln. I mean, if Lincoln says, hey, guys, can you, get out of the way? I mean, you're going to say no? I mean, come on. He's Abraham freaking Lincoln. I mean, he can probably just either be eloquent or, he'll try to be eloquent and then, sucker punch the guy because, he is also pragmatic and he'll do what needs to get done because, he's awesome. Okay, number 2 on the list, Mr. $20 bill himself, Andrew Jackson. Now, I'm just going to say this right here. I did not realize that everybody on my list is actually on money. That was purely coincidental. I did not realize it till I got to this point here, but it's kind of apropos, I guess. Actually, not really at all, but whatever. Purely coincidental. Okay, so Andrew Jackson, the guy is a lunatic. The guy is an absolute madman. If this was a list of the most psychotic presidents, he'd be on the top of the list, bar none. Like, it wouldn't even be a challenge. Like, nobody's touching him as far as that goes. So first off, the guy liked fighting. He fought as early as in the American, he was the last veteran of the American Revolution, as early as 13 years old, and he had permanent scars on his face because he refused to shine the shoes of a British officer, and the guy slashed him with a sword, and it gave him permanent scars, and he hated the British from that point on for the rest of his life. So, but yeah, basically as a 13-year-old, he was already showing signs of his craziness and his badassery. Now, throughout his career, he fought Indians, he fought against the British, he fought against pirates, he fought against pretty much everybody. I think he fought against the Spanish at one point too. I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically, if there were people that existed, he probably fought them or wanted to fight them at some point or another. He was personally very courageous. He often commanded armies in battle, but it wasn't from the rear. He was right there with his men fighting along with them. And more to the point, though, about his personal capabilities. The guy was, well, like I said, an absolute madman because, well, not only did he duel people, he enjoyed dueling. He thought it was fun. We're not talking like a sparring session with some light, sabers here or some, like light, like small swords or something like that to the first blood. No, we're talking like pistols at dawn, shooting at each other. Like 10 paces, turn and draw to the death. He did this multiple times. He is known to have participated in 4 duels, probably upwards of 20. There's some sources that say he participated in over 100, though this is hotly disputed by historians. Probably not, though, but more than one. If you do this once, you're probably an idiot. You do it more than once, you're an absolute lunatic. He did it at least 4 times, probably closer to about 20. And what makes it even more insane is that his favorite tactic was to let his opponent shoot him. That's not like I'm not paraphrasing here. No, I really meant that. His job was actually, his plan was to stand back to back, take 10 paces, turn, and fire. His plan was to let the other guy shoot him first. Just let that sink in for a second. Let him shoot him first. He'll just like endure it through sheer hatred of all living things. Endure the pain. Endure the fact that you've just been shot. And these are pretty, well, I wouldn't say they're high caliber, but they're like, these are chunks of lead smashing into. These aren't exactly aerodynamic. They're balls. Like, they're not like conical bullets. They're just solid sledgehammers slamming into, shattering everything. Let the guy hit him. And then now honor would dictate that the other person had to just stand there until Jackson shot. So Jackson would then calmly level his pistol and put it right through the guy's heart or right through the guy's head. Put it in a fatal area. So yes, his plan is to let people shoot him, and he did this for fun on multiple occasions. Okay, it's so much so that I think there was a cabinet member who later on would say that he rattled when he walked like a bag of marbles because there's so much lead in him that the bullets that were embedded in would bounce off each other, and you can hear him rattling around. And one time during a cabinet meeting, he got bored, so he took out a knife and pried one of these bullets out of him. I think it was wedged in his arm. He just like popped it out because he just felt like, right there, just pulled out a knife and dug in his arm and popped out this bullet there because he felt like it. Okay, do you think a bunch of guys standing around there with like, well, give me your money, do you think Jackson cares about them? Like, no. Actually, if anything, my job would be to restrain him, more than anything else. So, well, actually, that did happen, actually, historically. While he was president, he had the nickname of Old Hickory, partially because he's tough as hickory, which, yes, he is. But also, he would walk around with a hickory cane. And one time, an assassin tried to shoot him, pulled out 2 pistols, and fired them at him, except both pistols malfunctioned, probably due to dampness in the air, but both pistols malfunctioned. Jackson saw this, and then took his hickory cane and proceeded to beat the guy almost to death. His security detail was there just to pull, like, they didn't actually do anything to the guy. They were there to pull Jackson off of him. Okay? The guy was an absolute madman, and at the first sign of any sort of trouble at all, he's probably going to go like full, like, rabid Wolverine on people and just start like tearing people's faces off. And probably, again, if in this scenario that I presented, I would probably be there more or less trying to keep the other people like, no, Mr. Jackson, please don't kill them. Don't kill them. Please, please. Like, yes. That's enough. Really, he's already dead. Stop. So, yeah, Andrew Jackson, do I want him backing me up in a fight? Yeah, except I probably would need a good alibi. Like, I don't know him, no officer. I don't know him that well. I really, it just sort of happened. Yeah, so Andrew Jackson, number 2. There you go. And my number 1 pick, Theodore Roosevelt. And I know what you're thinking, Rob, you said we can't pick Theodore Roosevelt because he's the obvious choice. Yeah, I know, but he's like the obvious choice. You have to pick Theodore Roosevelt. Even if he's not an option, he still is an option because he's just that awesome. So he actually started out life actually as a fairly sickly child. He was very, very intelligent, but was also incredibly sickly. Like basically like the stereotypical, scrawny little runt. He had very bad asthma growing up, so badly that he actually couldn't sleep lying down. He had to be propped up in a chair so he could breathe properly. And eventually, one day his father said, "Son, you must also build your body." And Roosevelt said, "Yeah, you know what? That's a good idea." And just through sheer force of will, he basically overcame his asthma. He started exercising, started working out, and just overcame it through just sheer determination. Also, he developed eventually a habit for drinking coffee, and coffee, caffeine at least, is a bronchial dilator, which does ease asthma symptoms. And he would drink about a gallon of the stuff a day. Actually, I think it's, Maxwell House, good to the last drop. That was actually him. He actually is the person who said that and gave them their phrase. When he was asked about it, that's where it came from. Because he would just drink the stuff by the gallon. And this gave him copious amounts of energy. It made him somewhat hyperactive. And the guy was just basically became the sheer embodiment of American awesomeness. And I'm just going to be scratching the surface here about how utterly cool this guy was. Just so you know, he's my favorite president. I think he's everybody's favorite president because, he's Theodore frickin' Roosevelt. But so without going into the full badassery that is Theodore Roosevelt, for example, I'm not going to go into the fact that he was a rancher or a big game hunter or an explorer or the time he stabbed a mountain lion to death. Yes, that is true. He actually did do that. And, all that, and the fact that he was on an exploratory mission up one of the tributaries of the Amazon River and almost died from malaria, but he shrugged it off because, he's Theodore frickin' Roosevelt. I'm just going to be sticking with his unarmed combat capabilities. How good would he be in a fight? Just how tough is he and how capable is he? So to start with, when he was in college, he developed a passion for boxing, and he was an amateur boxer while he was there. And it's a habit that he kept for many years, even into the White House. Yes, while he was in the White House as president, he set up a boxing ring in the White House and would spar with professional boxers, even while entertaining guests or dealing with government business. So there'd be foreign dignitaries and ambassadors, or there'd be cabinet members coming in, or just reporters coming in, and he'd be sparring with this heavyweight. And he wasn't a big guy. He was only like 5'8" or 5'9". Like he was, not a heavyweight. And he's sparring with heavyweights, while also answering questions from reporters or, dealing with the policies of running the government, because he can totally do this. And he kept doing this until he actually got caught with a hook that he didn't quite see coming, and he ended up blinded in one eye. So he took a much gentler hobby of judo. Yes, he was one of the first practitioners of judo, first American practitioners of judo, one of the first people to introduce it to this country. And he actually had a very good relationship with Japan and did foster a very good relationship with those guys. And actually achieved the rank of brown belt, the first American to do so. And he actually did put these skills to good use on many notable occasions. For example, one time when he was a rancher out west, this is before he became president, he was actually accosted by a person in a saloon. He was in a saloon, and somebody came in there, drew a gun on him, and said, okay, this bespectacled little... Because if you look at it, Theodore Roosevelt's kind of a weird-looking dude. Let's just be perfectly honest here. Pulled a gun on him and said, okay, you Four Eyes, you're going to be buying drinks for everybody in this bar. Roosevelt looked at the guy, looked at the gun, and then proceeded to knock the guy out. He just punched him 3 times, bang, 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 KO'd the guy, and then walked out. Yes, he brought a fist to a gunfight, and he won. In another instance, Roosevelt had one of his boats stolen from him. This again while he was out west, and rather than just accepting his loss, he went out in pursuit of these guys, going 3 days without sleep. He eventually did find them, and rather than actually just, shooting them, because this is literally the Wild West, law is sort of more of an option than an actual policy, he brought them back in for justice. He captured them and then brought them back to civilization so that they can face a fair trial. And just to make this things even more bizarre and just even stranger, in order to keep himself awake, he was reading Anna Karenina. And then he actually was disappointed that he tried to discuss it with the people who stole his boat, and they had no idea what he was talking about. And he actually got really angry with them. He was actually more angry that they couldn't like talk to him about like civilized topics like, Anna Karenina and, Russian literature, rather than, the fact that they stole a boat from him. So, yeah, that just goes to show you that, yes, he can actually handle himself when dealing with a group of guys that really don't like him. He can handle a bunch of bad guys, no problem. Scenario that I'll outlined, he would probably just start like wrecking everybody's faces, and while they're laying on the ground, broken, bleeding, and just basically, in reconsidering their life choices, he'll be standing over the top of them, giving them a lecture about why they need to go home and rethink their lives, and probably convince them to never do such a thing again, because, like that, it would be completely within his character to do so. He actually did something very similar to that. This all pales into comparison with his most impressive feat of badassery, and that was getting shot. See, he was on the campaign trail for his third term. It was actually, he left office after 2 terms, and he was disappointed with William Taft, and just whatever. That's not the point. Point is, though, he was on the campaign trail, and a deranged lunatic came out of the crowd and shot him. I think he was using a .32, so not a particularly powerful handgun or anything, but the bullet went through his glasses case and the speech that he had rolled up, this thick speech, and it did penetrate and ended up lodged. The bullet ended up lodged in his body. He fell over, obviously, because, he'd just been shot. He then put his hand to his mouth, and he did not cough up blood. So because he did not cough up blood, Roosevelt thought to himself, okay, it's probably not fatal. So he stood up, and then the crowd's like, there's confusion going on. And so in order to calm everyone down, he said, I don't know if you are all aware, but I have just been shot. But it takes much more than that to stop a bull moose. He then said, because of the fact that he had just been shot, he's going to be giving an abbreviated speech. He then takes out the speech with the bullet hole in it and now blood covering it. And it's just, everything going on with that. He pulls that out and then proceeds to, instead of giving an abbreviated version of speech, just does the whole thing, which took him 90 minutes. Now, keep in mind, this whole time, the wound is not dressed. The wound is still bleeding. And if you've ever seen Roosevelt when he speaks, he's very animated. He's very much like he's doing pointing and doing gestures, and he's like making a lot of grandiose movements. So blood is just splattering all over the place. It's still actively bleeding. It's just, it's one of the most insane scenes you could possibly imagine. He gives the whole 90-minute speech. He then finally agrees to be taken to a hospital where they determine that, yes, it is in fact not in a fatal location. So they just sewed him up and they sent him on his way. Yes, okay, he basically, like Andrew Jackson, he can just tank a bullet. I don't think a couple guys standing out there trying to use their fists are really going to be all that much of an issue for him. So, yeah, when it comes right down to it, Theodore Roosevelt, he is the number one choice for this. There's really no other option. Even when he is not an option, he is still an option. So, there you go. Ultimately, my favorite president. I think pretty much everybody's favorite president. And, yeah, the TR, number one. There you go. So that's it for this video. I just thought it'd be a fun thing to do. In any case, please hit the like and subscribe button. More videos coming out whenever I get around to it. And have a good day. Or don't have a good day. You're adults. Have any kind of day you want. See you later.